Hi, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of the PB&J Library Show, where we are welcoming back Arapahoe Libraries in Colorado to talk about building positive relationships with teens. Kids are a vital part of our library programming, but I think we can all agree that the teen years are some of the most difficult to navigate. Here with us today to share insights into understanding this experience are Catherine Boddie, Erica Schimmel, and RaineBo Thunder, who incidentally is also from Wyoming. Side note, we talked with Arapahoe Libraries several years back in a similar fashion. We're glad to have them back to share what they have learned since. I'm Paige Bradenkamp, the e-resources and school library consultant at the Wyoming State Library, and I am the PB to the PB&J.
And I am the J to the PB&J. My name is Joanne Pruitt, and I am the Youth Services Consultant at the Wyoming State Library. And we are so excited to be joined by these wonderful librarians at Arapahoe Libraries.
And now, without further ado, we'll turn it over to our guests to take it away.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We're excited to be joining you from very sunny Colorado today. I think Colorado's always sunny. That's what it's known for. So we are excited to share with you. We will start with some introductions. So we are here for our webinar, Building Positive Relationships with Teens. And yes, we'll introduce ourselves before we get started. My name is Catherine. My pronouns are she, her. I am currently the Teen Services Supervisor for Arapahoe Libraries, which means that I oversee all of teen services for our library system, and I have the privilege of supervising our district-wide outreach and programming teen librarians. I've been with Arapahoe Libraries for 15 years, and so it was me way back in 2018 who got to join Paige for our previous session that we did. And so I'm excited to be back today. And the picture on the, I think, far left of the screen is me as a teenager, way back in like 1998, I think. So, and this was me going to my first concert at the Southeast Texas State Fair. And if you notice, the Nokia brick cell phone that I had there in the bottom probably still works today, wherever it is. And I will let RaineBo and Erica introduce themselves.
I can go next since my picture is next in order. I'm RaineBo Thunder. My picture is the one with the horse because I am originally from Wyoming. I started my library career at Eastside Elementary in Cody, Wyoming, uh, where I was an elementary school para. I now work mostly with teens as a teen services librarian for Arapahoe Libraries. I've been with Arapahoe Libraries for 5 years and in my role currently for 3 years. But yeah, I'm from the great state.
I'm Erica. I'm not originally from Wyoming or Colorado for that matter. I also use she, her pronouns. I have been with Arapahoe Libraries for a little over 4 years as a teen services librarian. Um, I am the picture on the far right, I guess. I like to joke that we represent the range of teen emotions in these photos, and I am strongly repping for some teen angst. You might be feeling it wafting off your screen. Yeah, prior to ALD, I bopped around different types of libraries. So I have experience in a middle school library, an academic library, other public library systems. I like new experiences. What can I say?
All right, so we're going to jump right into a little activity and invite you to engage with us a little bit in chat if you are willing to play along.
All right. So this one is just to get you a little bit excited about what we're going to be talking about. Which picture describes your mindset going in today's workshop? We've chosen these pictures because they are most favorite and least favorite candies in the great state of Wyoming. Let us know in the chat how you are feeling coming into this workshop today. I think personally, I'm a little bit of a number one. My brain is chaos. That's such is librarian life.
Okay, well, thank you for playing along. When we are in person, we normally do that as like a conversation. We would ask you to say why you picked that particular thing. Often we will use a range of spicy chips because if you work in teen services, you know that hot chips of any kind are the thing that brings them in. And so we will use different, which spicy chip are you feeling today? Or which pickle chip? Those are two that we do a lot. We're going to move into just some invitations and a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So today, as we go through the content that we'll be discussing, we invite you to stay curious, approach this content and the contributions of us and your colleagues with curiosity, and be open to sharing different perspectives. And welcome the expertise. We welcome the expertise as well that we know is in the room with us today. Being open, letting the content in. We all have individual truths and the intersection of facts, feelings, and experiences. If you're finding your kind of truth challenged, try not to shy away from those things, but that bring discomfort, but sit with them and examine them. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong, just something to notice, which is something that a mentor of mine shared once. It was one of her favorite sayings, is one of her favorite sayings. No right or wrong, just something to notice. And then as we are sharing, we will be trying to be cognizant and also invite you to be cognizant of the intent and impact of the things that are shared as we go through today's content. And we also just want to give a shout out, and we will share some resources at the end, to an organization called the Flourish Lab. If you are not familiar with them, they are actually a local Denver-based organization that work with adults who work with youth and teens in out-of-school time. And a lot of the things that we will be sharing today are based on many of their practices and teachings. Eric and I had the privilege of going through their Train the Trainer program last year, and it has been invaluable for kind of shifting our mindset for how we work with teens in particular in our library spaces and in the programs that we offer. So just wanted to shout out and all credit to them as we will be adapting some of their content to a library setting today. And as we get going, we will have times when we invite you to share and chat. You are welcome to leave your cameras off. We will, as PB&J mentioned, we will have time to have questions at the end. We will also be trying to keep an eye on chat and answering as we go along. So if you have a question, our request would just be to put the word question in front of it so that it stands out a little bit for us in chat. I have 2 screens and about 10 windows open at the moment. And so for me, that'll help me to be able to see. And Erica and RaineBo and I will all be trying to keep an eye on chat as we go through. So yes, those are our housekeeping bits. And without further ado, we will jump right into content.
Okay, so since we're talking about developing positive relationships, let's start off thinking about those positive relationships. So we'll invite you to share in chat. Think of an adult who had a positive impact on your life as a teen, when you were a teen. So how did they impact you? What did they do? What was it that made that impact positive? The story that I'm going to share, actually, I had a whole different story and a whole different adult that I was going to share with you all. But you might be able to tell from my voice that I'm getting over being sick. And so this morning, as I was mentally preparing, another adult popped into my head, and it was my high school nurse. When I was a teen, for a variety of reasons, I got sick often. Like, I picked up almost every single cold. Thank goodness, I'm going to knock on some wood. Thank goodness that isn't the case anymore. But I was sick pretty often, and none of the adults in my life believed me, except for her. If I went to the nurse's office, she didn't ask me questions. She didn't give me a skeptical look. She just said, you know what? I'm so sorry you're not feeling well. Why don't you go ahead and lay down? We'll call your mom if we need to. And that was huge for me, to be believed, to be seen, and to feel valued in that moment. And so those are some of the things that, as we're working with teens, thinking about what are the things that had a positive impact on me, will likely also have a positive impact on them. On the flip side, moving along to our next slide, we're not going to ask you to share this in chat because this can absolutely be, you can have a trauma response thinking of these. Thinking about those adults who had a negative impact on your life. How did they impact you and what did they do? And for me, this is, again, an educator or in the educational realm. I can very vividly remember my 6th grade math teacher who would not have believed me when I was sick. And also was just, if you've ever had one of those educators, shout out to most of the educators out there, right? Like I have nothing but mad respect for all educators. And sometimes you come across educators who don't seem to actually enjoy the age group they're working with for various reasons. And this teacher clearly did not. And one of the things that I remember him saying that deeply impacted me was that girls aren't good at math. And that stuck with me for a long time. I'm not bad at math. I don't love math, but I'm not bad at math. But that someone not seeing potential or focusing on a limitation really stuck with me to the point where I'm not going to share his name with you, but I will share with you all. I remember his name, and that nurse, I don't actually remember her name. So that's something for us to think about as we're thinking about how do we have a positive impact on the teens we're working with, and how do we maybe sometimes have a negative impact.
All right, so just to reiterate, positive adults are the key takeaway from from this. But here are some ways that you can be a positive adult to a teen. I just basics, just like being a caring adult, even caring about their situation, knowing what's going on in their life, being present. Like asking them questions, talking to them in a real way, seeing their potential and not just saying that girls can't do math or similar, like seeing the positive in them and the potential that they are still growing and learning. Also, don't give up on them. I mean, you can have some negative experiences or situations, especially in the library, but don't give up on them. They can turn it around. They can, with time and energy, you can become friendly with them. And then find their strengths. This is a big one. What are they good at? And complimenting them so that they feel good and comfortable in your space. Also, you can challenge them to rise to the occasion. So taking responsibility for themselves and their actions and their space and how they affect the people around them. A lot of times that's a big one in library services. Just trying to get them, to challenge them to notice the people around them. But you can also notice changes in them too. As they come into the library more frequently and become more comfortable, you can notice, physical changes, like if they get a haircut, but also notice changes in attitude or vibes or, emotions, and just be there and be available for them. And I think probably the most notable is consistency. Be consistent. I have a quick story to tell about one of my library kids, Amy, who is the most introverted kid around. She comes to my programs and she rarely talks to anybody except maybe me, who I force her to talk to me. um, but she knows what to expect when she comes to my programs, and she keeps coming back even though sometimes it does not seem like she is having a good time, but she comes back, and now she is even volunteering at the library this summer. So just being consistent and noticing things and learning names and stuff like that can really make a difference even when you don't realize it is. Yeah. I think we can move on. Yes. So this is a quote that we all think it kind of a tearjerker. Either we spend time meeting young people's emotional needs by filling up their cup with love, or we spend time dealing with the behaviors caused from their unmet needs. Either way, we were going to spend the time. And so this really gets to the sort of heart of what we're after, which is that you kind of just need to spend the time with the kids, and hopefully we will be filling their cup and they will be having positive interactions versus the negative ones, which sometimes will happen anyway, but it's usually caused by unmet needs.
Yes. This was a quote that we shared in a teen meeting recently, and all of us were just like, we should print this out and hang it on the wall as we transition into some of those discussions. So for us, this, as I mentioned at the beginning, has really been a mindset shift. I don't know about all of you, but if you work with youth, I think one of the things that I get asked most often, especially in the position that I'm in, is to offer training or mentoring or staff support on how to manage challenging behaviors in teens. And the focus is very much on like, this is a problem and how do we make this not happen? How do we make it go away? And for us, as I said, and as the slide says, it really has been a mindset shift. Because that was also where we have historically trained from, that perspective of we'll help you understand why they have challenging behaviors and things like that. And instead, we have been working over the last couple of years to shift the way that we are working to from controlling those negative behaviors to trying to inspire positive behaviors. Because as the Pam Leo quote says, either way we spend the time. And so if we can spend the time on something that is more positive and impactful long term, then so much the better. So it's a long process, I will say. And the thing that I think that is difficult, especially for people who are perhaps in the midst of some challenging behaviors, is that it's not an immediate or quick fix. And it really is about kind of your mindset, and depending on where you are, it can be harder to hold on to if you're experiencing burnout, if you are feeling like you're short-staffed and you're kind of the lone person. I know in many systems, if you're a teen person, you're the only one. And so you might feel like you're a lonely island doing all of these things on your own. So as we go into the kind of the rest of the content for this webinar, just the thing to keep in mind is that there's not necessarily, and we don't have like the magic fairy dust to give you the fix for all of the challenges you may see. There's not one right way to solve difficult situations, but a mindset of caring and welcoming is important. Building those relationships with youth, supporting their social emotional learning needs is very important. So on that regard, what do we mean by social emotional learning? This is like a full day workshop in and of itself, so we are not going to go super deeply into the social emotional learning piece of it. This is the castle wheel that is commonly used in social emotional learning to think about some of the ways that it shows up. In adults, this is called emotional intelligence most often, and for youth, it is often described as social and emotional learning. So really, as we were doing our work, we're thinking and centering how can we help support the development of some of these things. Lots of research that has come out of the pandemic is that social and emotional learning is one of the things that has suffered the most with some of the disruptions to learning and other things. And to contextualize it, and you may already be intimately aware of this, but our sixth graders, or our kiddos who just finished sixth grade, were our COVID kindergartners. So they were the ones who had their learning disrupted in kindergarten. And our seniors who just graduated were our COVID sixth graders. And so they had their learning disrupted at a pivotal moment as well. And we have actually had a lot of conversations both with other youth services staff and with teens themselves about how that impacted them and their experience of those teen years. So, like I said, a social emotional learning workshop is a full day thing. And so we aren't going to go deeply into it, but we wanted to contextualize a little bit as we talk about this idea And as the Flourish Lab, again, shout out to them, frames it of moving from power to partnership. Because whether or not we feel like it or whether or not we realize it, as adults and authority figures in library spaces or wherever you might be working, we do hold most of the power in the interactions that we have with youth. Again, whether or not it feels like it, and I know sometimes they are specialists at making you feel like you have no power in a situation, but we do. And our goal is to move to having them be active participants in their experience in the library and that idea of partnership. So we want to acknowledge that, like, at least for me, most of the things on the power side are the comfortable space. They are what I would consider like the thing that is my instinct to go to immediately. And it takes pausing, it takes a lot of intentionality to move to the partnership side of things. And it's not going to work in every situation. But we wanted to talk about, like, each of us is going to take a moment to kind of talk through what some of our go-tos are. And one of the ones that I get when we do this training or workshop for library staff, one of the ones we get questions about most often is that idea of adult voice versus youth voice. What does that mean? And how can you actually meaningfully have that be a thing that happens in the library? Adult voice means that, like, what I say goes, and what I think is going to be most effective is going to be the thing. And youth voice, to me, at least in my interpretation, really is trying to find ways to get their feedback, have them be a part of the conversation about, like, what would a positive experience in the library look like? How can we have a meaningful experience? What does that look like for you? And I guarantee you, because as I am now very firmly in adulthood, I don't always think that the same things are going to create a positive experience as youth do. I just don't, and it's okay. I'm not supposed to. Like, I'm not supposed to relate to them on, like, the youth level because I'm a grown up and I have different experiences in my life. It would be inappropriate for me to be their best friend, but I can still work towards building relationships with them. I can still try to find ways to amplify their feedback, their voice whenever possible. Erica, RaineBo, any that y'all want to highlight while we're here?
I particularly vibe with the looks for negative versus seeking out the positive. This happens pretty frequently in many libraries where you see those kids come in or those teens coming in, and you are immediately like, oh, here we go. We're going to have the fart noises again. This is how it's going to be. But instead of framing it in the negative, what you really want to do is seek out the positive. Like, oh, these kids are here in our library. They're seeking out a safe place. What can we do to, like, make their experience better? And hopefully mitigate some of the fart noises or whatever it is that they're doing. This is a problem we are having in one of our libraries right now, is these group of middle school kids come in and they like to make fart noises, and it really disrupts the the patrons around them, which I think is their point. So yeah, when you see them coming, you immediately want to think negatively, but maybe you can channel this energy into something good, or give them something to do that's a little bit more respectful.
I'm going to talk about respect means do what I say versus respect means I value you. I think this is something that many of us have experience with, particularly those of us who were perhaps raised in an environment where it's this immediate respect your elders, or how often is the answer to the question why? Because I said so. And that's not, I'm going to talk about this again in a minute, which is part of why I chose this one. It's a great segue. Respect that's not respect, right? Automatically doing something that someone who I perceive as being in a role of power over me, doing what they tell me to do, that's not respect, that's fear in many cases. Respect is I value you. You know, I value your opinion. I value your comfort level. I value your experience. You are a fellow human asking something of me. And so that's a very different feeling than respect means you don't question me, you don't question my authority. And that can be, it can be hard to move out of that, especially if you're in one of those situations where you're like, oh my goodness, they're jumping on the table. Why did they just jump on the table? Also, if they're jumping on the table, perhaps the first thing to do is be like, hold on, let's get down off the table. But that let's chat about it rather than just you're in trouble or wagging your finger. I think that's an important thing to remember, that we're on more equal footing, not power looking down. All of these often take more time. I'm kind of stepping on Catherine's because I
You're
realized,
good.
yeah, this is my segue into our next slide. All of these things take a little bit more time, right? They're not quick fixes, especially when we think about respect. And respect is one of those big keys to positive interactions. It's important to remember that respect is not automatic, right? Again, going back to that respect your elders. Absolutely, our elders deserve respect, but that doesn't mean that we need to do what they say with no question, or it's not a power relationship, or it shouldn't be. Teens in particular feel the need for respect to be earned. They not only want you to earn their respect, but they want to earn your respect, right? That's that value. It's also important to remember that teens are sensitive to social feedback and standing. And so, as they're figuring out who they are and where they belong, the way that we treat them is integral to that experience. They want to be treated as competent, as valuable members of the group. They want to have agency and autonomy. If you think about how much of a teen's time is regulated by someone else when they come into our libraries, this is finally a space where they might have some autonomy and have some space to just breathe and be who they are. Keeping in mind also, when we're thinking about respect and when we're thinking about building that respect, power struggles are not productive ever. If you think about a time you've gotten into a power struggle with someone, what often ends up happening is one of you shuts down. And that's not building that respect or that positive interaction and that positive relationship. We want to give a shout out here to Kelly Bogan's blog called Don't You Shush Me. Kelly Bogan is a high school librarian. This blog is amazing. Highly recommend it. Really talks about a lot of these things, particularly how power struggles are not productive, right? Again, when they come into our libraries, they're coming in from situations where most of their lives have been controlled and regulated all throughout the day. And they're looking for community. They're not looking for yet another adult to tell them what to do. And so really important in this is making sure that when correction is needed, not calling a teen out in front of a whole other group of people, whether it's their group of peers or a group of strangers. Again, think back to what we just talked about, that they feel the need for respect and they are sensitive to social feedback and standing. And if they're getting called out in front of everyone else, that's a feeling of embarrassment and shame. And so one-on-one correction when it's needed goes a long way to building that rapport. It also gives you a second to kind of step back and feel like you're not necessarily on display as much. Other things to think about, I feel pretty strongly about this. We've talked about this on our team a lot. Training all staff to have the possibility of feeling comfortable working with youth. And it doesn't have to be intensive training, but at least a little bit of training and some awareness of some of the social emotional learning aspects that we were talking about and some of the needs that the youth coming into our libraries have. Also, keep in mind that fewer rules can be really helpful. Thinking about our codes of conduct or the rules that we have, think about the why. What is this rule in place for? And who is this rule benefiting? Because often those rules aren't benefiting our neurodiverse patrons or our patrons who are coming to us with different life experiences. So thinking about what rules are there for perhaps safety versus what rules are there for maybe inconvenience or discomfort. And fewer rules, it just makes for fewer power struggle possibilities. And co-creating those rules with the teens can be really, really productive. And finally, not holding grudges. It feels cliche to say, but every day really is a new day. And having a teen come in and welcoming them the next day, even if you had a tough day before, not even mentioning that tough day before can go a really long way to making your space welcome.
All right, so here's a few more keys that we want to talk about. But most importantly, building relationships and having those positive interactions really can be useful. If you have a relationship with a teen, when the correction is needed, you can have a conversation instead of, having to make those like directive statements. And just think about, your own stuff. Trying to make sure that that what the kids are doing or what the teens are doing is not just something that's annoying to you and is actually something that is harmful or destructive, or think of the rules more in a like, who is it hurting, as Erica said, and not just like, oh, the kids are, if they're like saying cuss words and no one else is around and no one else can hear it, like, is that something that you need to be, policing, or is that something that is just like natural teen behavior? Maybe it's annoying to you, but that's just sort of how teens learn and grow. One of the things that has seemed to really make a difference for me is remembering their teens' names and faces, and having like a personal connection with them. I recently started doing like an icebreaker and names at the beginning of my programs so that I know everybody, and it seems to really created a better connection. So when things get rowdy, I can calm things down a little bit easier knowing people. Recognizing your own biases is important in all aspects of librarianship, but especially with teens. And there's a lot of things that, because teens are just, kids in bigger bodies, you have to remember that they are not adults. And even though they may look like adults or want to pretend that they are adults, they are not. So it's good to like check your biases in all aspects, but for sure with teens, and see the person and not their behavior, of course. Also see their potential. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Don't see their actions, just always see them as people before you see what they're doing. Demonstrate a positive tone and body language. That can go really well, and using humor can also go really well with teens. Instead of barking at them and telling them no, just try to like diffuse the tension a little bit with a little, a short joke or something, and light body language to show that you're not like angry, but like maybe their behavior isn't the greatest. And that's similar with talk with youth, not at youth. And then also just know when to chill out, because as you get riled, they also get riled, and it can cause a feedback loop, if you will.
We were having a conversation with one of our other teen librarians last week, RaineBo and I, that really kind of illustrated some of this stuff to me. And it did. Definitely, most of these things don't happen overnight, and it takes time even for us to tune to some of these things. And she was talking about they have recently started seeing a lot more teens in their library, which is a wonderful thing. I'm always happy to hear that. I know some people see groups of teens coming into a space with a certain amount of dread, but I'm always super excited. But she did say that there's been this learning curve as they figure out like what is the acceptable levels of noise, and when the noise goes from just noisy, joyful teens to a problem that needs to be addressed, and trying to figure out because sometimes they sound the same. And so it's almost even like training your ear to know, oh, something has shifted. This other thing is fine. And it's just like an acceptable hum. And then other times it's like, oh, maybe I need to go just peek around the corner and see how everyone's doing. So that was it's really funny to me thinking about like, oh yes, that's very accurate. What is happy noise versus something's going wrong noise? Or when things get too quiet. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so, um, so a lot of this hinges on building trust. And I think the metaphor of pennies in the cup or money in the like banks of trust, things like that is a very common metaphor. And so when we're thinking about that, like what's the recipe for trust? But also why is trust important? So thinking about and take a moment and think about someone that you trust. What are you willing to do for someone that you trust? Many things, right? Because you trust them, you know they're not going to like do something that's harmful to you in the long run, usually. And so we're willing to do almost anything really for someone that we trust. So if that's true, thinking about the young people in our libraries, gaining their trust is super important. And if they don't trust us, I think that is when we are going to see many more challenging behaviors and acting out, because why should they do what we ask? We have not tried to gain their trust in any way. And they don't have any sort of investment in this being a positive relationship other than perhaps the motivating through fear that we talked about a little bit earlier. And so thinking about what goes into trust, many of the things we've talked about today. So respect, working on actually modeling respect and then earning the respect in return. And coupling that with treating them with dignity. I think that is something that sometimes we forget about. We always want to be treated in that way, and making sure that we are giving that same level of dignity to the young people that we are working with, looking for opportunities to find moments of connection. Again, I'll reiterate, I'm not saying that you should be their best friend. It would not actually be appropriate to be their best friend, but finding those moments to connect, those times when it is, maybe even just listening for a few extra minutes, as if they're having a rough day, or if they're particularly excited about a thing that they're passionate about. This is not a teenager, but RaineBo and I got to sit with a 7-year-old at one of our bookmobile stops the other day. And it was so great to find those times to connect with him. And by the end, he trusted us enough that he was like building a fort on the ground next to us. And it was so great to like have that interaction and know that like we were someone that he felt comfortable just sort of letting loose with. He was a very precocious kid. So he was having a great time, but it was a really great moment of connection for us. And then, as we've mentioned before, consistency in how we show up, in the things that we are asking of them, in the things that we are offering of ourselves to them, in owning the things when we mess up. Can also be really important, because nobody's going to be perfect 100% of the time, but you can build just as much trust by being consistent in owning when we've made a mistake or when we've overreacted, or hey, I'm having a bad day. This wasn't on you. This was me like putting my emotions onto you unfairly, and owning that sometimes will gain more trust and respect than all of the other positive interactions that we can have with them. So all important things to keep in mind. We'll take just a brief moment and invite you to reflect about some of the things that you might do to add or take away from that bank of trust. We won't spend a lot of time here because we want to make sure that we have enough time at the end for us to answer any questions that might come up. And we also have some of our scenarios that we'll talk through in a moment. But ultimately, there are going to be times when we break trust. And so thinking about what is needed to repair trust. If we have taken coins out of someone's bank. And as I mentioned earlier, often owning those mistakes, as an adult, modeling what it looks like to apologize and acknowledge what we've done, hold ourselves accountable to young people can go a long way to repairing that and rebuilding the respect that we want to mutually have with them. So yeah, very, very important. And something to be cognizant of because it's happening all the time. Every interaction that we have either adds or takes away. And sometimes when we have taken away, it's going to take more time to regain that trust, to repair that respect. So just also being patient with ourselves, being patient with them if they don't trust us immediately, again, is also going to be something that's important to do. So, um, so what does this look like in practice? We have crowdsourced over the years and through our own experiences, some of the most challenging situations that come up most frequent situations. Some of them I find very funny, which is not appropriate, but and some of them are they're just universally some of the most challenging things. So we were going to talk through a little bit some of our strategies for what we do in these scenarios. As I mentioned with the loud large groups, I think that our fellow librarians' strategy of figuring out and kind of tuning our ears to hear, like, is this just joyous noise or is this something that is becoming a problem, and figuring out how to monitor both things and allow for both of those things. And a lot of our libraries are open floor plan. They are not like traditionally quiet library spaces. And yet we have a lot of patrons who that's still in their mind what a library is. And so sometimes that's also managing the expectations of the other patrons in the library that our libraries are not like quiet sanctums anymore. They are open spaces. They are places for kids and teens to experience joy and make connections and have fun, as well as read and study. And so, yes, it's a lot of managing expectations on all sides. Any Erica or RaineBo, anything y'all wanted to highlight?
I was thinking about the cursing one again the other day, because this is something that in any library I've worked in, different people have, some of this is subjective, right? Different people have different ideas of what a curse is, even, but also about whether or not teens should be speaking this way. And I do want to acknowledge that sometimes I think the urge to correct comes from a place of, I want to be teaching them, I want to be helping teens and youth in our libraries to develop social skills. Sometimes that's not where it's coming from, but I do want to acknowledge that sometimes that's where it's coming from. This kind of idea of, well, they need to learn that you can't go around cursing at the top of your lungs. Though I would also encourage people to think about what language you're allowing adults to get away with. But one of the strategies with cursing that I've used that I got from a Facebook librarian group was, okay, what other word can we come up with? Instead of using a word that is a curse word, what could we say instead? And I've actually, part of one of the most fun things about the role that RaineBo and I have is that we get to spend a lot of time in schools. And so I actually got to implement this in a school, and they had so much fun with it, coming up with a different word. One of them came up with salad, which was not the euphemism for the word that you might be thinking. Didn't start with us. But they really, they had a fun time with it. And it was something that inadvertently actually brought the volume level down as well, because they were thinking about it. And then we kind of had a good laugh every time. The other thing I've had good luck with there is to kind of like nudge them, be like, hey, so I don't actually have a problem with what you're saying, but we're not the only ones in this room. And so if you just take it down just a little bit, let's just be aware. If you're talking with, so that goes back to that talking with instead of talking at, then it's something you're kind of doing together. But yeah, some of the alternate words they came up with were amazing. It was wonderful.
I can talk a little bit about messes left behind because that's probably one of the biggest ones at several of our libraries, because we have snack time at many of our branches. And basically, you're gonna you're just gonna have to know that messes are gonna happen. But I think that going back to like creating relationships with teens and having that rapport with them will allow you to gently remind them about their messes, or if they come in, if they leave a mess and then they come in again, you can like have a talk with them about not having snacks this time because they left a mess last time, or, it really goes back to the rapport, just like knowing your teens, and being able to like reason with them. And usually, if you are honest that, hey, if you leave a mess, it ruins the space for other people or makes the library look gross, and uninviting. A lot of times, most teens or any human would be responsive to that.
I think that's a really good point, though, RaineBo, is that many of these things are going to require repeated reminders. And it's very important to remember that it is not that they are just willfully ignoring, but that the way that their brains are developing means that they genuinely have probably forgotten the request that you have made. So it's important to keep that in mind. And to try to hold back the frustration when you have to say the thing for the 100th time, because it's not that they're trying to like ruin your day and willfully ignore you. It really is probably that they've genuinely forgotten. And when they're reminded again, they sometimes even have like moments of chagrin of like, oh yeah, I remember you told me that now. Okay. So I see we got a question in the chat, so we'll just move on to our question time. And as was referenced earlier in the chat, we did include some pronghorns are the true name for antelope. We get them here in Colorado too. I get to see them on my drive to some of our libraries all the time. So yes, here are our questioning pronghorns, and we'll begin to answer questions that come in. So we have one from Cass. How do you all quell gossip between teens or determine what is appropriate to allow them to speak? Happens a lot at my events. Small school means everyone knows each other, and I don't know when to intervene or if to intervene. That is a great question. Do either of you have any suggestions for that? You all do programming day to day more than I do these days, so I'll defer to y'all if you have a suggestion.
A lot of times, if I get these sort of situations, I try to reason with them, like think about if you were in this situation and somebody was talking about you, that sort of putting yourself in their shoes situations. Hopefully you have created the relationship to have this conversation and just speak frankly, like, hey, you guys, this is what you're doing is harmful, not only to yourself, but to others. And people are not going to respect you if you are spreading bad information, or at some point you may even have to just tell them, change the subject. Let's talk about this, or let's talk about that. Sort of the squirrel mentality. This is what we're doing, and try to hopefully like change the subject. But that is a really hard one.
I've done similar things. There was actually a couple months ago in one of the programs, I like the word ouch because it draws attention to what you've just said could be potentially hurtful. And so what I said there was, ouch, I don't know that I would want to be talked about. So maybe we tried talking about something else for a little bit, and it took a couple more times. But that ouch did kind of stop. And I've used it in other situations too, where it's just an ouch, that could hurt. And it just offers that moment for a pause, I think, without it being that finger wagging that we were talking about earlier, like you're doing something bad, but just an, ooh, ow, that could really hurt.
While you're pondering questions, I'll just put up our contact information. not that we're necessarily wrapping up, but I also want to give an opportunity. If you have questions, ever want to converse more, if you want to see some of the other training things that we offer, please feel free to reach out. We are happy to share. In libraries, I don't feel proprietary about pretty much anything unless I have borrowed it from someone else. And then I usually check for permission before I share. But anything that we have, we're happy to share the resources. So do reach out. Happy to troubleshoot. Uh, there's a lot of collective knowledge on my team, so I'm privileged to get to work with them, and always happy to share more. All right, we will turn it back over to Paige and yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So, thank you so much because this is wonderful information. And it is important to remember that we were all in that teen head space at one time too. And the teens now, they've never done this. So it's all new territory for them. So trying to extend a helping hand is, I think, the least we can do as adults. And I appreciate you coming. We appreciate you doing this for us and sharing this wonderful information.
If you do feel like reaching out to RaineBo, Catherine, or Erica, make sure you do because they are experts, they've been trained, and they have a lot of collective information. So we couldn't
Absolutely.
cover all the things that they they usually speak on or talk about. So this is definitely a short and sweet little snack size version.
There is a book, 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People by David Yeager. That is one that I read, and there was a book group with our Wyoming Enrichment Network. And that has some very good points and touches on some things that you brought up today in your presentation. But I thought that was very illuminating and very helpful to help to understand and build positive relationships with teens. So I just wanted to throw a plug for a book in there because, again, libraries. Thank you again, Catherine, Erica, and RaineBo, and everyone else who joined us. Have a great day, everyone.
Today is a good
Thank
day
you.
for PB&J. Yeah!